Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
I'd like to welcome you to Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Ray Samich, and it is my great honor and privilege to introduce you to my longtime radio colleague and the co-host of this show, and more importantly, my spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
I am excellent, thank you. Always great to be inspired by you and sharing some time with you and with our wonderful guests that we have as part of our program, especially our Zoom audience. And we'll tell you later how you could be a part of that if you'd like to. Ratanjit, we had a recent show about self-worth / self-love. And I know you kind of use those terms interactively, that they're pretty much the same thing from your perspective. But let's start with that before we really get into this show today, which is a continuation of that process from a little different perspective. What is the difference? Do you think there's a difference between self-worth and self-love?
Basically, the self-worth, you in worldly sense, basically that is all tied to our pride and ego. Until you find, and same thing with self-love. Self-love is what the world calls is all tied to your human body mode. What is good for me? Both are things, self-love and self-worth. The true self-worth and true self-love, you cannot find, you cannot distinguish until you find yourself. Because when you mistake yourself to the human body, which is gifted to you as a housing for you, and the divine power resides in this human body, so until you understand that difference, until you understand the enlivening force to the main ingredient in this human life, and your self-worth and self-love actually goes to that enlivening power. And that enlivening power is inside you, but you do not own that. So once you see that divinity in you, the overwhelming feeling of gratefulness and reverence comes in you. And pride and proud, those things disappear. So that is a fundamental element of that. And Ray, go ahead.
So it was a pretty good summary. It was an excellent summary of what we talked about in that prior show. And the distinction that I was looking for there between the self-worth and the self-love, they really can be used interchangeably, because when we think about loving ourselves, we can't do that unless we have some self-worth, unless we value what our worth is. But to your greater point, anything that we do that acknowledges our value, we know ourselves how weak we are. We know how flawed we are. We know our human body, our human habits, our actions are not perfect. And so it really is very difficult and challenging to have self-worth and have a lot of self-love if we just stay in the human mode. And it turns into, in many cases, self-hate, which is really how we started that conversation, because we all know people, and maybe we've all felt at times that we hate ourselves. We hate what we've done. We hate our habits. We hate how we've hurt people. And then now we're stuck with those very intense emotions against ourselves, which is not a tremendous way to live if we hate ourselves. So we spent that last show, to your summary there, talking about understanding the real us. And if we grasp that divinity within us, if we understand that that's who we really are, then it's easy to have self-worth, because we realize that there's incredible worth, uh, universal worth, eternal worth in that divine power.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I basically, when you are in the normal mode of defining your self-worth with the worldly possessions and your human body, how beautiful, how powerful, and what is your color, what is your gender, and whether you're born in a rich family, what is your heritage, and then what you have accumulated. So that if you define yourself from that angle, you will be always in the competitive mode. It's never going to be enough. Look at the billionaires, and they are the greediest people on earth, because it is never enough. So unless you understand who you are and live every moment in the grateful mode of having the divinity and divine power, universal power enlivening you, and that is indicated by every breath we take. So every breath reminds us that I am still alive, and that divinity and that universal force is still connected to me, and it is empowering me. So you have to be grateful for that force. That is your true wealth, because in absence of that, you will leave everything in this world, and you basically become a dead body, and they cannot keep you too long, because we start to deteriorate, we start to stink, and nobody has attachment to the dead body. Certainly, that is not my parent, that is not my spouse, that is a dead body. So unless while we are living and this human body is functional and all our senses are active because of the universal power which is present in this human body, we must, every living moment, every breath we take, we must be grateful. Because until you are grateful, until you appreciate, until you thank this divinity to be present in you, your self-worth, your self-love is only basically tied to your worldly things, which is never going to be enough. You are going to be competing. That is what happens, right?
I think this has been a really good summary for the opening of the show. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. And you're absolutely right. The competition, if we do think we're good, we don't think we're good enough, because we gauge our self-worth by what others have. And if we think we're bad, which I do think that there's an awful lot of people that live in that negativity, because I just run into that all the time, where they just have a very poor feeling of themselves, a very low feeling of themselves. And for them to climb out of that hole that they put themselves into is very, very challenging. So if we just think about our human self-worth, it's very, very difficult. If we think of ourselves and we're grateful for the or the true self-worth, which is the divine within us, then it's a whole different picture. So from there, let's launch into today's show. Because when we had our post opportunity to interact with our Zoom guest last week, and then subsequently over the course of the week, I've talked to a few other people. And it's interesting how sometimes, Ratanjit, we don't think about a topic relative to us. Maybe we don't want to admit it applies to us, or maybe we just don't think it does, really. But we really find the situations in others. And so people that I spoke with talked about how how I have a friend, how I have a child, how I have a spouse, or whatever it is, whoever it may be, that doesn't have self-worth, and how we can recognize that problem and inspire them to find their self-worth. And it's a very related topic to where we've been, but it is a totally different perspective, because now I'm not only talking about what we need to talk about, but also how to do it, how to do that inspiration, how to say the right words with the right tone and the right love and concern and everything else that it takes to communicate this to others. And that's where the inspire word comes in, because how do I communicate effectively? Recognize, first of all, the situation, and then communicate in a way that helps people. So that's what I'd love to talk about today. And however we need to do this for people that we know, with the underlying truth that maybe we're really going to be teaching ourselves in the process. and because we have this within us, but we don't want to see that. We just want to see it in others first. So what do you think? How do we start with that? How do we notice this in others? How should we pay attention? Because I think you agree, unless you're in this mode, everybody really has low self-worth ultimately. When they lay their head on their pillow when they lay their head down on their pillow at night, most people aren't feeling really good about where they're at in their life.
If you take two pieces of iron and one of them is subject to electromagnetic field, it becomes a magnet. Now the piece which has magnet, if you rub it against that other piece of iron in a one direction, and that also becomes a magnet, because what magnetism is, aligning the north and south pole in the same direction. They always existed in an iron, but because they are not aligned, they don't become magnet. So only a magnet can magnetize other iron. So until you find your own true self-worth, you are not able to help others. So when you are magnetized, when you have the self-worth, you see others with a different eye. You don't see whether they are not having self-worth, or they are bad, or they're. So you only first see the divinity present in them because they are alive. So your self-respect for them, your reverence for them is very high, because you are seeing the divinity in them. And as a consequence, you begin to respect them, you talk to them intelligently, you serve them. And this person who has low self-esteem certainly see you differently, and your presence comforts that person. Your talking to him comforts that person. And eventually, in your presence, that person feels lifted, because you have higher reverence for that person. And now you automatically become in a position to communicate with that person. That person would listen to you because of your continuous servicing mode, a continuous respectful mode, because that other person, people don't treat him the same way. They judge him from the material things that person owns or whatever the other reasons that because of lack of confidence they have low regard for that person. So that is the beginning of this. And sooner or later that person is going to ask you, how are you who you are, how you behave in that fashion. And that is the beginning of self-education, and you can share slowly with that person. And instead of basically talking philosophy right from the get-go, you have to take it slowly and build a confidence with that person, right?
Everything you said makes total sense. I absolutely hear what you say. I'm going to shake it up though, because I was thinking in advance of this show, knowing what we were going to talk about from a totally different take on it. And maybe I was way off base and you'll tell me, I'm sure. But I have done interviews with people, for example, that said, these are the signs that somebody is having a stroke. So watch for this and this and this, because some people don't even know they're having a stroke. And these symptoms are starting to happen. So watch for these. And these are your telltale signs that they're going into this and they need help. Or this person is depressed and he's hiding it. She's hiding it. Watch for these signs of depression. And if you notice these things, these are telltale signs that they're into depression and they need help. Okay. I'm giving these totally different examples because I was thinking that for this show today, there were also going to be though a similar thought process as that. In other words, these are the signs to watch for people that have low self-worth. These are the people that have low self-love. And if we watch for these signs, then we can try to help them. Just like signs of depression or signs of a stroke. I was trying to put it into a quantitative analysis that says these are the factors to watch, and then if these happen, this is the next step. You've totally separated that, and we've talked instead about that we're not even able to solve this problem and approach finding a solution for someone until we totally have got our act together ourselves. And so we do need to take a pause. We need to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to understand this better. Should this show again be about understanding us? And because unlike finding a person that is about to have a stroke and helping them, we're not even in a position to help anybody with self-worth or self-love until we've resolved that issue in us. We'll come back and talk about that. This is Stress-Free Living. And we were talking before the show. There's so little self-worth and self-love in the world because the world has got a lot of problems. There's a lot of things happening around us that we are not comfortable with, and we're a part of it, and it's causing stress in our lives. We're trying to help that. Please stay with us. We're back in just a moment. Okay, we've got a little time here. Open up your mics and share a thought or question.
Rakesh ji, welcome back.
Welcome,
Namaste.
Rakesh.
Namaste.
We miss you.
Well,
Good to have you.
that's very kind of you. I've been meaning to come back and had some projects going on, so I'm happy to be back. I always enjoy it when I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, you make a tremendous
Thank you.
contribution. So you have any
Oh, yeah,
thoughts?
Yeah. So okay. Well, yeah. I'll go ahead and just say a couple things here real quick. So the analogy you give about magnet, it really is, resonates with me because I'm a psychiatrist, and when I was in training, one of my professors told me that you need to first get therapy yourself, and you need to get to know yourself before you will be able to help anybody in counseling. And he was so right. And I did that, and that will take longer time, so we don't have time for that. The process by through which I went, but it was extremely helpful for myself to go through therapy for myself. And the second part was that I see this at two different planes. One is like a very mundane plane where we live in a world where the main paradigm is one of competition. And I think that is on a very mundane level is the reason why people feel the way they feel, because they're constantly comparing themselves to others. And I'm going to stop there.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll work those thoughts in. Anyone else? We just have a few seconds. Anybody else have a quick thought, question?
Yeah, Ray. So I also like the analogy or the metaphor about the metal, but I think what it really comes down to is what Dr. Sandhi always says is you really can't control others. You can only control your own behavior. And I think what he was saying was, in a way, that if that person reflects off your behavior, then it's up to them to change. So the title of the thing, How Do We Affect Others, is again about being ourselves.
Very good.
We are back on Stress Free Living. So good to be with you. So good to interact with our Zoom guests that we have as part of our live show every Saturday. If you'd like to be part of that, check out our YouTube channel, Stress Free Living Radio. Stress Free Living Radio on YouTube. Just put that into the search. You'll find well over 100 shows. And more importantly, maybe you'll find our Zoom link, and then you can join us live on our show, and we interact with you before, during the breaks, and after the show. And I have some wonderful in-depth conversations from people all around the world that are joining us from across the United States and many other countries. Are so delighted to have them as part of our group that we can converse with and have something that we share in common, which we're all looking for. We're all looking for our group of people that we can relate to. And this is an amazing group that comes together with us on a regular basis. Ratanjit, so many places to go with this thought today. I don't know if I should go back to where I was at or some of the comments that were made from some of our guests here. So let's go back to where I ended up with, and then we're going to work their thoughts in for sure. But the analogy I gave, which I know is a crazy, totally different perspective than what we've been talking about, but is it possible that we can see the signs in others where they lack the self-worth and the self-love, and without us being there ourselves, without us being grounded in our own self-worth, legitimate, real self-worth based on gratefulness and awareness of the divine, is it possible that we can even start the journey of helping others? Or are we just fooling ourselves that we can inspire others if we don't have this total awareness ourselves?
That we are assuming that there are some people who are already having higher self-worth. They have self-love. There is nobody, including us, because unless you consistently go back to the divine power present in you, this will remain only at the level of knowledge. Knowledge never transforms you. Knowledge applied in the habit form transforms you. until you cultivate this habit of living in oneness, you will not really have the true self-love. So it is erroneous to presume that Ratanjit has reached there or somebody has reached there, because we are constantly moving from human body mode into the oneness mode. And you have to consistently make attempts to migrate into the oneness mode and see the perspective. So eventually you will have a habit of moving back into the oneness mode, and you will have the higher self-worth, and you will be able to share that wisdom with the people who are basically you are trying to change, you are trying to make a difference to them. But until you make this realization, the moment when we sit, you and I sit here, and we presume that we are already in the oneness mode, it is the biggest erroneous mistake we will make. Ray?
Well, you can't leave it with that last thought without continuing. So what do you mean? What do you mean when you say that? Do you mean that we never really get there totally? Do you mean that we can say we're in the oneness mode, but by the fact that we say that, we're not really there? Is that?
Yeah,
I
this
don't.
human body always has demands. Your five senses, it aches, it feels hungry, it's always, so your human body is constantly drawing your attention to you. And it is important to serve this human body. But when it draws attention, you must realize that this human body is drawing attention. It is not me who is suffering. So this will happen as the time goes and it becomes a habit. First thing is this knowledge, knowing that there are human body and there is enlivening force in us. And then we get on the journey of continuously recognizing and living in the oneness mode. This is a journey. It's like when you are traveling on the road. So it's not one time that you get on the road and that's finished. You have to keep your steering on the car to stay on the road. Otherwise, you'll be off the road. So it is similarly, we have to consistently, knowingly be aware that we are going to get off the road. We are going to get in the competitive, demanding, greed, fear-filled human body mode.
The fact that we acknowledge that we have this, let's say that everything you're saying we have bought into, and it's become ingrained in us, so that we do know the real us is the divine, is the divinity within us. That there's no question in my brain, in my body, my whole being, that is the real me. And yet I also am aware that I'm a human being. I'm aware that I have human habits and human tendencies. Am I in some way giving myself a free pass that I say, okay, I am this divinity within me empowers me, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm also a human being that sometimes has these worldly tendencies. I sometimes will get depressed. I sometimes will get anger. angry. I sometimes will want to overindulge, and I will want to, buy something I really don't need to buy, or overeat, or whatever it is that I acknowledge as a human habit. But I am aware that that's not the real me, but I also know that as a human, I have these abilities. Is this making sense? Is, is that, are those two thoughts compatible in us, since we ultimately are physical beings that have five senses? I mean, is it realistic to think that we can just be this empowered divinity and not have any bad habits anymore, not have any desires to do anything that our human body frivolously wants to do?
That's why, when you become an accountant, there's a refresher course to maintain the license. Similarly, every single day, we start with a meditation or spending time alone, making us realize that who we are. We cannot take it for granted. We have to constantly refocus into this brain has to be given power to be controlled by the divine force. If the brain is controlled by the human body mode, it is always going to be fearful, greedy, egoic, and all that. So this has to be consistently done so that this exercise, this awareness, focused awareness of who we are, we call it meditation or we call it whatever you want to call it, gets you into that mode. And more you do that, more and more you have the chances of remaining in that mode easily and switching back to that mode easily, Ray.
So you partially answer the question, but not fully. Respectfully, the fact that I have to remind myself of who I really am makes perfect sense. And meditation, reflection alone within myself reminds me, get back on track, get back to realize this. Does that mean then that I will no longer have those, and I'm going to call them desires, and I don't mean desires only like in a relationship way or whatever, but desires for anything that isn't really part of my divine journey, desires for anything I can buy, anything I can do, anything I can have that I don't really need. My body doesn't really need this, but it thinks it does. And there's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's telling me I need these things and I should do these things and I deserve these things. Do those desires ever get turned off? Do those become unimportant on my journey if I'm truly ingrained in this? Or do I come to realize that that's just part of my journey? And when I use the term free pass, am I allowed to have those desires anymore occasionally? Or am I supposed to never want those again?
Basically, there are two sides of this. One side is that you see those things, a good food, tasty food, proper place to live, and fancy things and those things. And those become your tools to serve others rather than getting indulged in them. Yes, you do eat small portions. You begin to more regulate instead of Indulging in the five senses, you serve this human body. So what food will serve this human body? What clothes would serve this human body? What place of living would serve this human body? What kind of company is going to serve this human body? Or what kind of company it can serve? So suddenly your mind is focused on serving the divine force present in us and present in others. So I call that high, adding the highest value. Basically, the serving I call as adding the highest value. So you convert that mindset once you are in the oneness mode into this uh, sensory evaluation, looking at things and finding good things and bad things, basically utilizing those things into serving others, serving the society, serving yourself. So it's rather than indulging, that is the only difference.
And that's a huge difference. Um, Utilizing our human desires, okay, to add the highest value is different than using or participating in those desires just for our own greed and satisfaction and pleasure. And so I appreciate that distinction in the process. I'm asking these questions because one of the comments that came during our discussion here with our Zoom guest during the break was knowing yourself before you can help others, knowing really who you are and what makes you tick, so to speak, that before I can fix the watch that's not ticking in others. And so if we understand this about ourselves, obviously we're in a far better position not only to inspire others, the thought process for this show, but it gets back into what we've talked about so much in parenting, which is that children don't do what we say to do, they do what they see us do. And so the ultimate inspiration for communicating this thought process is for other people to be amazed by how we are. Right? I mean, it's when they see that this is working in somebody else and what is not working within them, they are inspired to be open to a change. So I'm trying to fully understand how we can grasp this ourselves. And so a follow-up question for me is, if I'm in a good position with my self-worth and my self-love, and I've grasped everything that we've been talking about, you've been sharing, and I have a binge, okay, I fall off that. I do something that is more egotistical. I do something that is more greed oriented than I know I should have done. That's where self-hate comes in. I don't want to have self-hate. I realize that the divine is there. I'm immensely consumed by the gratefulness and the divinity that's within me. But my human side has made a mistake and done something. Is that okay? Do I say, get back on track? You momentarily got off, but this is going to be a part of our journey, that we're not always going to be good every day. How do I get back on track and not take it as a case that says, okay, you can do that every once in a while, it's perfectly fine. You know, if you're good 5 days a week and you're bad 2 days a week, that's okay, that's acceptable. How do I truly evolve into operating at this almost divine level?
Basically, when you have some hot water, for example. You put it on the skin, it's going to burn.
Yeah.
So as a child, when you come on earth, you don't know the difference between hot and cold. You want to touch everything. So Ma said, no, no, don't touch it. It's hot. Until that child experiences something by touching, so then only that child stays away from it. Right?
Correct.
Now, what happens is in the world, when we make mistakes, instead of correcting them, instead of making them understand why they made mistakes, because they were so much ingrained in the human body mode of greed, fear. So in order for them not to make mistake, they have to be cultivating the habit of staying in oneness, knowledge of oneness and staying in oneness. So instead of imprisoning a lot of people in the prison, we have to understand the reason they are making mistakes. They are basically so much ingrained in the fear, greed, and ego mode. And we all will make mistakes. And until we correct them through institutions to convert them, to understand them, to living in the oneness mode, we will not transform the society. No matter how many laws and how many punishment we can have, this is always going to remain there. And we call them as a bad human, good human. He's bad, he's just not good. It is all because of our fear, greed driven mindset. And there is another aspect of that. Why some people are more greedy, why some people are more egotistic. So this core character is formed at the age of 6, before the age of 6. Some people, the child gets afraid, suddenly fear becomes the driving force. And somehow they pick up these either greed or fear as a main objective of them. And this controls all the education which we give them, the tools, how to do things. Those tools would be utilized basically for those core characters to fulfill those. So until we systematically place a human being in the making, a child, into the oneness mode right from the beginning, we will not transform these human beings. Now, one more comment I want to make, I think it's before you want to. And
Go ahead.
you mentioned about finding yourself. There are two aspects of finding yourself. One is enlivening force, what enlivens, another is the human body. What are the needs of the human body? So you are uniquely created by the nature, by every human being. So to know what is good for this physical human body is also a knowledge. That knowledge is required to serve your human body properly. That is very essential. That is also self-knowledge of the human being, of the human body, in addition to the self-knowledge of who is empowering this human body. So those both are very important to us, right?
And I hope that that's what this program is accomplishing. Okay, that one of the things that I hear most often from people that I talk with about this show is that we talk about things that they really haven't discussed and they're anywhere in their life. They maybe have thought about some of these things for a fleeting moment, but they didn't know how to evolve the thought process any further than that. And that's what we try to do here to really kind of get into some of the thoughts about how to live and how to overcome the different problems that we have. Ratanjit coined the term applied spirituality a long time ago, decades ago. And I love that idea that says spirituality is not going off into the mountains and into the desert all by yourself. Applied spirituality means how do we do it with our families, with our loved ones, with our strangers, with our workplace, and cope with matching these concepts together and doing it without stress because we found a way to do it in harmony. That's what we hope to bring to you every day. We're going to be back in just a moment, wrap up today's show on trying to inspire others to have self-worth and self-love. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, we have a quick 90 seconds. If anybody has a thought, please share it with us now, and then we'll have much more time after the show. Welcome to our people that came in at the end here. Sudeep, An, Kim, great to have all of you. Anybody have a thought?
May I quickly answer your question? Your question that you asked has not been answered yet. I'd like to answer it. Yes, there are signs in the behaviors of people who are self-loathing. So they actually, many of these people hurt themselves in many different ways, sometimes overtly, sometimes covertly. That's a telltale sign. It's just like if we don't like somebody else, we have a tendency to harm them. If we don't like ourselves, we have tendencies to self-destruct.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on that after the show, Rakesh. Thank you for that, but I'm not sure I totally understand, and I want to. So let's talk about that in just about 9 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you. Anybody else have something quick that they want to share with us? We're just about to get back into it, but I can ask one question on your behalf if you'd like. If not, we'll just try to summarize the show here in the remaining moments and get that inspiration. All right, I think we're on our own, Ratanjit. I may have a chance to work in another thought from the previous comments. Thank you. All right, we are coming back. This is Stress-Free Living with Ratanjit and yours truly, Ray Samich. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have just a few minutes left, Ratanjit, in trying to put all of these thoughts together and maybe introduce one additional one, and that is the ability for us to ever control others, because we all want to do that. We all, especially when we see a problem, when we see somebody that has a problem, and that's even a wrong phrase. When we see somebody who is operating differently than we are, and we assume that they're wrong and we're right with how they're coping with things, then our first effort is to change them. Our first effort is to get them to do it like we do, to think like we do, so that they can then do things the way we want them to do it, with the good intention, I think, most of the time, of trying to help them. You know, we're right in the way we're seeing things. We must be right because we're always right. So if they're not doing it the way we're doing it, they must be wrong. And therefore, I want them to I want to control them and have them think like I do. I think this scenario that I've just talked about plays out a lot in our life. Should we ever be in that mode? Is there ever a time, whether we're a parent, whether we're an employer of an employee, should we ever be allowed to have that thought process that said, I want to have you think like me. I want to have you, I want to basically control some aspect of your life, or are we always just confined to hoping that what we do inspires others, and we're not really supposed to try to get them to think differently?
In the human body mode, basically we are always insecure, and our egoic persona is controlling. So whenever we are trying to control anybody, basically we are in the human body mode. In the oneness mode, the control changes to serving. Instead of controlling others, we want to serve them. What is the best way to serve them? Sometimes it becomes the best way to serve somebody is to make them see the reality, which is not changing them. Once they see the reality, they will begin to serve themselves. The reality making them realize, but we have, before we can walk into a stranger and start lecturing about the universal wisdom and this and human body mode and everything, we have to create an empathy with them. We have to do something so that they would listen to us. We have to serve them. We have to listen to them. We have to respect them. We have to have reverence for them. So until we are in that position, we are not in a position to communicate. So it has to be, it's a long journey. And some people it takes shorter time, some people it take longer time. It depends on where they are part in life, what kind of experience they have had in life. And you have to be very sympathetic towards all those things. And until you are part in the divine mode of serving, that your capability of listening and understanding others is not there, right?
That's indeed. I'm so grateful that that's how you ended. That's pretty much how we're going to take it out with that thought process, because when this is the first time in the show that you introduced the element of serving. We've talked about adding the highest value, but specifically serving. If we just think that people are going to get on board with us just by being inspired by us, by just seeing the way we do things, I don't think that's realistic when they are in a bad place. When others are down and out for whatever reason, and life has kind of knocked the energy out of them, then they're not going to probably notice how we are. Not easily, not readily. But if we go into that divine serving mode, if we approach it not in a controlling way, not even in a teaching way, even though we're helpfully teaching, but it's not going to come across that way. But if we go into the service mode, if we spend our minds and our hearts thinking of a way to really serve that person, and like you said, sometimes it might be introducing knowledge that they need to hear, but doing it in a way that's loving and serving. Boy, I think you've just really come up with a phenomenal way here of ultimately inspiring others through our service to open their minds and their hearts to a whole different way, a whole different place of where they're at in their life. And of course, I do agree with you up front that we have to get this ourselves before we can do that properly. Any last words?
Purpose of life is made very clear to us the moment we realize that the divine force is enlivening us and everyone else. So there is only one divine force which is common in everything. And our purpose of life is to serve the divine force.
We'll leave it at that. Ratanjit, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our wonderful guests or Zoom guests, and however you're watching or listening. We are so appreciative of you. We hope that we've added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, 10 o'clock on the nose. We are clear. And if anybody now has some thoughts, Rakesh, again, I apologize. I was trying to grasp it, but I know we didn't have enough time to have a conversation. Can you, if you don't mind, if everyone else doesn't mind, can you restate that thought that you had expressed during that last break?
Sure. So let me do this by way of using two examples. Let's say somebody who's 22-year-old and is involved in self-mutilation. Let's say it's a woman, and she cuts herself, and doesn't know why she cuts herself. And see, this is a clinical type of situation because I'm a psychiatrist, and invariably the underlying issue is that this person was abused in early childhood. And because of that, because they translate that into this idea that it was their fault. They were bad children, or she was a bad child. That's why she was abused by somebody who should have protected her instead. So that turns into self-loathing, and it becomes so deeply ingrained over time, if it's not addressed early on, that translates into actually physically hurting. So that's one example. Other example would be somebody who is given to drugs, for example. And in my 30 plus years of being a psychiatrist, I have never seen a person with addiction who didn't have an underlying emotional issue. Never, not once. And sometimes those issues are very well defended and they don't show it. You have to really delve very deep into their psyche, and that's an art and science both. But they do that because they are, in a very subliminal manner, they're actually inflicting harm to themselves by way of doing drugs and alcohol. But it's at a very subconscious level, so they're not fully aware of it unless those layers are peeled off one by one at a time. So that's what I meant, is that people who, this does not include everybody who does not love himself or herself, of course. These are two extreme examples, but if the ideas are the same, if you feel that you are either bad or inadequate in some way, shape or form, then there is a tendency to self-loathe.
Okay, thank you. Those are excellent examples. Makes it very clear. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. My pleasure.
Anybody else that we haven't heard from today yet that would like to comment on today's show or your thoughts about the topic? Floor is yours.
Dr. Marsh? Sahil?
Oh, we got it pretty quiet today. Yes, Sal. Okay, we got to unmute. We got to hear you.
Apologies.
That's
Different
right.
gambling. But no, I really enjoyed the session, and some of the points were a great continuation of where we left off from last session. So no questions really, but I really enjoyed the session.
Thank you. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Ray, you got it down, everyone.
I
No,
Hi,
I
this
know.
is
I try.
Kim.
Oh, there's
Hi,
Kim.
Kim.
There you go, Kim.
It's always great to be with you guys. My capstone when I got my master's degree was going from self-neglect to self-care. And growing up in an environment that was distressed, being the oldest child, raised by a single mother, being a teenage mother myself, and then suddenly becoming my father's legal guardian when I was 19 years old after his mother passed away. Like even my parents were teenagers. There's just been a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I have an enormous heart. And I think I'm a natural caretaker, but it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. And I feel like I have turned myself inside out. Like I'm the first to graduate college. I'm the first to own a business. Just so many, I've been scared my whole life and still figuring it out and moving forward, not just for myself, but for those that were relying upon me. Single mom of 4, and then my sister got killed in a tragic car accident, and I took in 2 nieces and a nephew while I was getting my master's degree. Like I just know myself to be a person that will just take whatever needs to be handled. And somehow with faith, and my belief in God, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to figure it out. But then I also feel like resentment and frustration, especially like with kids, teenagers, they don't just follow your script. I'm like, honey, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. Just follow the script. So after I do all this sacrificing to open doors for the children, and then they make choices that look scary to me. I don't know. I'm listening to this conversation about taking care of yourself. I feel like it took for me to get breast cancer to figure out that I needed to ask for help. I need to stop taking responsibility for things that other people could be responsible for themselves instead of jumping in and solving their problems. I knew how to parent children. I didn't know how to parent young adults. So, yeah, it's complicated. And I also think about like codependency, enabling versus modeling, or, caretaking versus coaching, listening versus jumping in and solving the problem. And then how do I feel about myself in the midst of all of it? Because it's harder for me to not save than it is to jump in and save the day. And then there are all the feelings about that. So I appreciate this conversation. And yeah, thank you. I just wanted to share that. I hope it makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, Kim. And I tip my hat off to you for opening up the way you just did. It's not difficult. I mean, it's quite difficult. It's not easy, is it?
No, I want to thank you too for feeling comfortable enough. Kim, thanks for feeling comfortable enough with all of us to share all of that personal information. And I know this is a safe zone. The people that you're surrounded by here do care about you and do appreciate what you're going through. And I think the kind of thoughts that you're having in your head right now from that show are exactly why we do this, to try to get us to think outside of what society tells us.
I embrace the notion of oneness. I know when I'm loving, whether it's my kid or someone else's kid that's in need or caring for someone, I believe that my example can inspire someone else, can encourage them. I have actually been the benefit of other people's encouragement and support. It seems simple, but it's not easy. So I appreciate conversations like this that just affirm me and encourage me and give me more information that I can use in my life. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Ratanjit, any thoughts you'd like to give back on that? She said a lot.
Ray, Steve Marsh.
Yes.
Are you still Yeah. So one of the things that struck me was in your last segment or your last part, you talked to him about when you see somebody in a situation and you said something about control. And I don't think it's actually control. When you see somebody suffering, or you see in your mind that they're worried about something endlessly, or for no reason, and you want to say, don't worry about that, or da da da, that's not important, can't you see? I think what we're saying is that they can emulate you and see how you respond, but your words in that moment aren't going to change who they are or how they're going to deal with it. It's sort of, you have to go long term, and they have to see how you would respond. Those things don't work. Would you agree?
It's a long journey. Each person depends on, nature has put us in our life some difficult moments. So all the difficult moments, you think again. You put all your thinking in one pot and you begin to think. That is the transformative moments in life. So you cannot waste all your difficult moment, because those are the blessings and is allowed to transform you into a different person. But we consider there is a saying, there is a prayer in our in our faith. It says, Dukh daru sukh rog bhaya. That means whenever we are, dukh means difficulties, that is a treatment. And anytime we are very happy, that is a curse. Happiness have to be taken with the utmost gratefulness. Then only it allows us to capitalize on it. And difficulties have to be taken as a new learning, an opportunity for us to change our directions, opportunity to bring in the new wisdom, opportunity to focus on a different aspect of life. So this is another show for another day.
Steve, you asked if Doctor, you asked if I agree, and I think the way Ratanjit talked about doing that from a service perspective was the whole key on that. Because if we do try to, whether we try to call it controlling others or changing others, or even if we again are doing it from the right perspective, from the right intention of just trying to help others, if we're not doing it in a service mode, then I really think it's easy to be done in a controlling mode, in a I'm better than you mode in this moment, or I know more than you know in this moment. And I think that comes across. I think people get that out of the communication. They don't hear the words, they just see how it's done. But if it's done in a basis of service, and I was so grateful that Ratanjit brought that up at the close of the show, because I think ultimately that's the way to inspire others if they see that we're trying to really add value to their life. And then on top of that, we have the right methodology behind it, and the right foundation of truth behind it. I think that's the real core. So the service, I think, is so important to remember that.
On here, you're quite awfully quiet today.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so I was just waiting for my turn. I think
Okay.
you touched a very important point when you said that it will be very erroneous for people to believe that they are in oneness mode. I think that that is a great learning from this session, that nobody can be in that mode. It's a constant journey. You also mentioned how, which I really loved, that a morning meditation can help you get connected back to the same thought process. And you also referred that, even the doctors and even all the professionals and the pilots also have to go through the training again. I think that was very valuable, because sometimes in life we take things for granted and we think because we know it, we are into it, but actually we aren't. So that's the very beautiful point that you brought out. Um, I'm actually not having any questions on this subject, but I do have on some other subject if you allow me.
Sure.
Uh, so, meditation, these Saturday programs, which can be called termed as satsang, it doesn't matter how you term it. Uh, do you think meditation can be done with open eyes? That's the first question. Second, does satsang actually park you in it, in the oneness mode, or it just, again, is just a reminder, or it's again a exercise of the mind?
Satsang is, for those who don't understand the meaning of satsang, anytime you pray or you do any you attend church or temple or all that, that's called satsang. So satsang is a reminder of going into that mode, and ultimately the exercise which puts you in that mode is meditation. And meditation, close eyes and open eyes is not the question. Basically, closed eyes would focus on one thing. When you're open, your eyes are going to see other thing. But you can open your eyes and visualize the divine presence. Once you do that, that doesn't matter whether your eyes are open or closed. So ultimately, your focus, divinity, meditation is not reciting the name of God or anything. Meditation is basically visualizing you being the divinity power. You are actually feeling the enlivening power within you, and that'll take. You have to develop your own methodology and own way of doing that. Ultimately, it is the strong desire to be unified with oneness is going to lead you to that meditation.
Yes, I think that answers my question, that closed eyes or open eyes is not the criteria. The criteria is to focus within and connect within the energy source. Any method that you would suggest? Because there are so many methods of meditation, and I came across this Silva method, and there are so many people who have come up with their methods. Uh, what would be the best way to approach it?
You try those methods, whatever works for you. Ultimately, you are going to design a unique method for yourself once you experience all these other things. So ultimately, it is all about uh, focusing on the divinity.
May I
I
chip
hear
in
you.
there? Thank you for great questions and great answers. If I may, I would like to chip in few ideas there. So one, the literal meaning of the word satsang means the company of truth. So, so that very aptly describes what satsangs are. Um, in terms of, I think Ratanjit ji is absolutely correct in terms of, the types of meditations. There are all kinds of meditations which, first of all, if you want to know the the original source, then you have to go to what the book called Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. And I can speak to that with some authority right now because actually I am involved in a graduate level course I'm doing online, and that's what's keeping me busy on Saturdays. I just finished a course.
Go ahead.
Oops.
I apologize for that.
That's okay. So I'm just finished a course on Patanjali's Yoga Sutram. It's very clearly stated that it's such an individual thing, like which mode works best for a given person, and then also be aware of a lot of commercialization of yoga. And so you stay away from that. That's really my advice. Go to the original source and make your decisions based on that.
Ultimately, when you have a strong desire for unification, that is the fundamental ingredient essential for meditation.
Yes, and that's why it's called yoga, which means union of mind, body, and soul.
Yeah.
What is the spelling on that word that you guys have all used here? That you just said, the truth. What is it?
Satsang. Sat means truth. Sang means company.
So
When-
sussing is the word.
S-A-T, S as in Sam, A-T as in Tom, and then S as in Sam, A, N as in Nancy, G as in George.
Sussing. I've never heard that word. I've never known that. Okay, thank you. Sussing.
So whenever you are collectively in prayers or in meditation or all that, you are basically searching for the truth, which is the divinity present in you.